What are the big concerns on regulation for blockchain firms? Midterm delays, power struggles among regulators are just some of the issues companies are trying to get their head around. More insight has come from the more than 100-page report released by the Financial Stability Oversight Council. So let's find out what to make of all that with Kristin Smith. She's Executive Director at the Blockchain Association. Kristen, lots of reaction to this report from the likes of SEC Chair Gary Gensler, Fed Chair Janet Yellen. What's your take?
Over the past 6 or 7 months in the United States, the federal agencies across the government, including the FSOC, the Financial Stability Oversight Council, have been doing reports looking at different parts of the crypto ecosystem and making recommendations on any policy gaps that may exist. And you know, it's been a little bit of unfortunate timing because there were the bad market events over the summer with Terra Luna and the bankruptcies of a couple companies. But I think the good news is right now is that policy is kind of on one of two tracks. There's a lot of legislation that's being considered in Congress to fill in those holes. And there's also a lot of litigation going on. So companies are pushing back against different enforcement actions. And the reason these two things are happening is because the federal agencies have already sort of applied whatever existing authorities they have to crypto. So we've gotten past the stage where federal agencies can act unilaterally. And what's happening now is if they're overstepping their bounds, then it plays out in the courts. But really what we need is Congress to come in.
It certainly chimes with this idea of trying to apply old systems to something new, something that covers so many different parts of different sectors as well. Now, there's a lot to talk about in terms of how we're defining cryptocurrencies. Are they securities? Are they commodities? Who regulates what? How likely is it, do you think, that one regulator is going to end up governing everything in crypto?
So the reason that this has been, I think, such a debate is that if an asset is deemed a security, there's a tremendous amount of regulation, both of the markets, but also disclosures that are required of, around that asset. If it's a commodity, there's no regulation, right? And there's no, sort of uniform disclosures about the risks of those assets. What we have going on right now is there's legislation in Congress that would actually grant the CFTC the authority to regulate the crypto spot markets, like the digital commodity spot markets. And I think by having that in place, then that question of what's a security or commodity is less intense. It's my opinion that most of the tokens that trade in the United States on, exchanges today are probably commodities and not securities, because the securities laws, they really just don't make sense when we're dealing with networks, right? The information around what makes a token valuable is derived from the network, not a group of developers and the financial health of their entity, right? It's about the network. And so I think that the CFTC is likely going to be the home. I think, it takes legislation to do that because they don't have the authority to regulate spot markets today, just futures markets.
Now, talking about how firms are also dealing with this regulatory uncertainty, legal uncertainty, especially when it comes to how structures work, the whole UkiDAO situation really seems to have thrown a spanner in the works, doesn't it?
This is a huge issue. Like their DAOs don't have legal status, right? Like nobody knows what they are. And if they're deemed to be just an unincorporated, company essentially, then there's a bunch of regulation that applies. What's interesting about this CFTC case against B0x and UkiDAO is that they, they're holding the governance tokens liable for the activities of the DAO and saying that the DAO needs to register with the CFTC. And they're servicing all of these individuals through posting on one of their websites. It's hard to blame the CFTC because they don't have any other tools in this instance other than to use an enforcement action. What we need Congress to come in and do is provide a framework to figure out how to go about doing this type of regulation and the flexibility to exclude certain elements of that regulation from either individual software developers or governance token holders or DAOs, because the risks there are probably different than you would have with a centralized entity. Good news is, the crypto community and the industry is very engaged in Washington. And I think they're being very reasonable about the fact that there is some new regulation that's needed. I think we're on a good path that all of this is going to settle out. We're not in a place where crypto is going to go away or it's being threatened or crushed. Like, we're having productive conversations, and I think that's going to lead to good policy outcomes.
All right, that was Kristin Smith from the Blockchain Association talking to us there. You can get even more insights on the latest developments in blockchain at the Phil Lisbon Summit that is running from October the 30th to November 4th.